Now I'm going to show you how to adjust a few key preference settings that are going to help you work more effectively inside Photoshop. I just know it. And so for starters here, notice these tiny thumbnails inside the layers panel. They don't really allow us to see what's going on, which is why we can make them bigger by dropping down to this empty area below the last layer and right-clicking, and then notice you can switch to medium thumbnails or large. Now for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to switch to medium thumbnails so that you can see that these thumbnails have grown. Notice that the name of the Puffins 2 layer has become truncated. If I hover over it, I can see the entire layer name, or I can drag this vertical bar on the left side of the layers panel in order to make the panel slightly wider so that we can see the full name of that layer. All right, let's say now I want to switch to large thumbnails. Well, problem is I no longer have any empty space below the last layer. So what I need to do instead is click on this flyout menu icon in the top right corner of the layers panel and choose panel options to bring up this dialog box here. Now, if you don't want any thumbnails, you can switch to none right there and then click OK. And now any pixel-based layer is going to be represented by a paintbrush. Any vector-based shape layer will be represented by a little square, and so forth. That's not what I want, however, so I'm going to click on that flyout menu icon and choose panel options again. And then I'll select the biggest of the sunflowers, which will give me the biggest thumbnails. I'm also going to change a couple of checkboxes. Notice this guy right here, add copy to copied layers and group. You do not need to affix the word copy to a layer name right after you get done copying it. 90% of people just go ahead and turn that checkbox off. Also notice this guy, use default masks on fill layers. That's going to add a layer mask to any solid fill gradient or pattern layer, which is usually not something you want, and it ends up cluttering the panel. And besides, you can always add layer masks later just by clicking on this little icon down here at the bottom of the layers panel. So go ahead and turn that guy off and then click OK. And now notice we have these big meaty thumbnails that help us see the actual contents of the layers. All right, now I want you to click on the Channels tab in order to switch over to the Channels panel. This image is an RGB image, meaning that it contains a mixture of red, green, and blue light, which is very typical for digital photographs. You can look at those red, green, and blue channels by clicking on them. So here's the red channel. It's luminance-only data. That's why we're not seeing any color. Very bright where this image is concerned. Things grow darker in the green channel and darker still in the blue channel. But the key here is we have 3 channels of completely different data that blend together in order to create the RGB composite. Now, we won't be getting to channels for a while. However, in the meantime, you want to see large thumbnails by right-clicking in this empty area down below here and choosing large. All right, now I'm going to switch over to the Paths panel, which allows us to see any vector-based path outlines that are associated with the image. Notice I have this teeny little thumbnail. To make it bigger, I'll right-click below the thumbnail and choose large, like so, at which point I can see that the name of this path is magnifying glass singular, but we seem to have 2 circles. If I click on that guy, then I can see that in addition to the circle surrounding the magnifying glass, I have another circle surrounding this puffin's head. If that's not what I want, then I would switch to this black arrow, which Photoshop calls the Path Selection tool. Go ahead and click on it to select it, and then I'll click on that second circle right there, and I'll press the backspace key or the delete key on the Mac to get rid of it. All right, a couple more changes we want to make. I want you to click on this adjustments icon right here, which looks like a black and white circle. If you can't find it, then you can go to the window menu and choose the adjustments command. And now I want you to click on the flyout menu icon and notice this command right here, which is going to add a layer mask by default to any adjustment layer, which could be a layer that lets you change the brightness or contrast or color of an image. Now, once again, you can create a layer mask anytime you like by clicking on that little mask icon at the bottom of the layers panel. That's not the panel I'm looking at right now, but that's what the icon looks like. And so there's no reason to create a mask by default. Again, it just clutters up the layers panel. So go ahead and choose that command right there to turn it off. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and hide the panel by clicking on that double arrow icon right there. And what I want you to do next is select the rectangle tool. And if you're not seeing it right here, then click and hold and select the rectangle tool from the flyout menu. And then just go ahead and draw a rectangle any old place. And notice that forces the display of the properties panel. And that's going to happen every time. If I put that panel away and draw another rectangle, then I am going to bring up the Properties panel again, which allows me to reposition the rectangle, change its size numerically, add rounded corners. Not necessarily the kind of thing you need to do on a regular basis. So what I recommend you do, just so that this thing isn't just flying in your face all the time, is click on the flyout menu for it and turn off this command, Show on Shape Creation. And now if I hide the Properties panel and draw yet another rectangle, the Properties panel does not come up on screen. If I want it, all I have to do is click on this little Properties icon right here. I don't, so I'm going to click on the icon again in order to hide it. And now I'll go ahead and switch back to the rectangular marquee tool. Notice when I hover over the tool, I get that big, huge, animated, rich tooltip. I don't really find those to be that helpful. They're more intrusive than anything. And so to get rid of them, what you want to do is go to the Edit menu here on the PC. That's going to be the Photoshop menu on the Mac. Drop down to the Preferences command, which is not nearly so low in the menu on the Mac, and then choose Tools. And then notice the second checkbox up here, Show Rich Tooltips. Go ahead and turn it off. Now what I'd like you to do is switch to the Workspace option over here on the left-hand side. And I want you to notice the size of the Title tab up here at the top of the screen, as well as the tabs for each and every one of the panels. They're pretty darn big. And the reason that they're a little big is for tablet owners, specifically folks who are using Microsoft Surface Book or Surface Pro. Now, if you are using such a device, then you may want to stick with the big tabs. However, if you're working on a computer, you probably want to make them small. And I want you to keep an eye on these tabs right here. As soon as I turn off the large tabs checkbox, they become small enough to fit their titles. And that's going to save you a fair amount of room on screen. At which point, go ahead and click OK. And notice now, if I hover over one of these tools, I'm going to see your standard everyday average tooltip, which still tells me the name of the tool as well as its keyboard shortcut, but it's a heck of a lot less intrusive. All right, now I'll switch back to the Layers panel because I want it to be up by default. And let's say you now want to save all these preference settings. Well, the best way to save preferences in Photoshop is to quit the program, because otherwise, if I were to crash, whether today or 2 weeks from today, I would lose all those preferences. And I'd once again have tiny layers thumbnails, I'd have rich tooltips, and all the other stuff. And so what you want to do is go up to the File menu here on the PC. That's going to be the Photoshop menu on the Mac. Then choose the Exit command, or on a Mac, it's going to be the Quit command, which has a keyboard shortcut of Control-Q here on the PC or Command-Q on the Mac for quit. At which point, Photoshop will ask me if I want to save my changes. No, I've made a huge mess of this file, so I'm going to click the No button here on the PC. That's going to be the Don't Save button on the Mac, at which point I'll return to my desktop. And now, the next time I start Photoshop, whether immediately or a few days from now, all of my preference settings will have been saved. And that's how you change a few key preference settings so you can move more efficiently through Photoshop.